Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I wanted to focus on the question, why is it that the mosque is losing youth? Apparently, many people have this question in mind, and they say that the mosque is losing youth. When we look at the ISPU study from 2020, we find that in reality that question is not in its proper place. The mosque is not necessarily losing or gaining youth. And really, the question has to be more nuanced, it has to be more specified, more particularized, in order for us to really understand what it is that is the case with the youth. We have some masajid that they run the youth away. You have that phenomenon where the youth are pushed out. And then you have other masajid that they're struggling to try to figure out what can they do to keep the youth. And they end up being able to cater to one group of youth and not to another group. And then that group that they cater to, how much investment they really have varies. Because what you find is that many of our communities, they say that they want to keep the youth, but when it comes to funding that reality, the funding is not there. When it comes to making the changes that are necessary, the changes are not made that are necessary. But one thing that we need to have clarity on is that we live in a time period which many of the scholars are calling غير مسبوق تاريخيا, is unprecedented historically. If we look at the impact of technology alone, that is enough to give us a clear understanding that not only is the mosque seeing a distancing of the youth, but also families. You find many families are in a situation where they have difficulty communicating with their children. And part of this is that the culture that we see now unfolding and developing has targeted the youth in a very specific way. And so it hasn't only targeted the youth, but in general, it has targeted adults as well. So many of us are disassociated from one another. And so we find that the virtual world, not to blame the virtual world, but it's a reality that many of us live in this virtual world. Right now I'm communicating to you virtually. We live in this virtual world. So there has been a certain type of education that has come from this reality. Many youth no longer know how to interact in the public sphere. That's one reality, the reality of not having the social skills, the reality of being impacted by the virtual world. And then there are those youth that are moving on. They're preparing themselves for the higher level educational experience. So they really don't have time to go to the masjid. So the masjid would have to provide things for them to be able to reel them in, so that their time is that which would be considered well spent as they're on their path to building their career track. So people are doing SATs, or they're trying to figure out what to do. Youth are working now. Many youth are working. You understand what I'm saying? So they're working and going to school, even at the high school level. And so there's a number of different realities. There's layered phenomena that will give us an understanding of why it is that youth are not going to the masjid, a certain bracket of them, because there's another bracket that are going. But like we said, we can't answer this question in a simple way, because simply put, the amount of data that we have is not a database that is comprehensive enough to give us a very direct, detailed understanding of this phenomena in all of its diversity. And this phenomena can be understood under one title: why is it that youth are not coming to the mosque, or why is the mosque losing youth? The reason for that question, or the reason for that phenomenon of youth not being engaged, there is going to be varied reasons. There's no way that we can deal with that question under one reason alone. But we have to look at the time period that we live in and the cultural reality. The more important question is, are our youth leaving Islam? That's the real important question. We have to realize that we live in a time period in which even adults are distanced from the masjid. And we can understand this maybe by looking at what's going on in Christianity, look at what's going on in Judaism, and we're able to get more detailed knowledge or approximate our understanding by looking at what's happening with religious communities overall. But I'll tell you, many of us, we say that we want the youth, but in reality, we don't want the youth. What we want is control over the youth. We don't want to understand the youth in their situations. You have whole organizations of youth that are organized in the Muslim community. And those organizations of youth, they really are smothered out from even being able to have space in place. You have whole organizations of young girls organized, and they focus on trying to understand Islam and trying to click together. And the ones that are successful many times are those that are more engaging in association. And they systematically teach knowledge, but a lot of the focus is association. Youth are looking for friends, they're looking for acceptance, they're looking for recognition. If that takes place outside of the masjid, but it takes place in the context, in the light of Islamic values, then it's a win for us. Even if our children don't go to the masjid, at the end of the day, then they have an environment in which they can profess their faith and they can be themselves. Then the question is, how do we deal with them when they go to the higher level education space that we call the university? What is it that is going to take place in the university? And so we have to be able to think out of the box, people. And one of the things that we find in the past, that it was the MSA which had that space that they were catering to, the university space. You find, for instance, the Hillel students group, they're well funded. The Jewish community well funds them. And so they have their spaces on university campuses. You have very few places in which we are funding Muslim chaplains to be on the university campus. I'm talking about the Muslim community funding, not the university. So we're not serious when we talk about the issue of the youth. If we were, then these were things that we would be looking at, and how to employ people and how to assist people in playing those roles, and how to support that type of concept from to become more popular. Not just the issue of finding piecemeal solutions to that, but changing the culture and how we look at that. The other issue is that, and I mentioned this in this past khutbah, is that when it comes to creating culture for the youth, look at the amount of films that we have. Look at the types of nasheeds that we have. Look at the types of books that we have. Look at the types of educational materials that we have. Most of it, even there's not even right now, from the last I heard, we don't even have one solid Islamic high school curriculum, people. We have some that are out there, but we don't have one solid, relevant high school curriculum. Not to mention the lower grades, but just high school curriculum. So it's the Muslim community itself, is the mindset. When we look at the UK, we find in this regard, the UK is way much more advanced than us. When we look at Singapore, Singapore is way much more advanced. And yes, you're talking to an imam who has looked in those things. I've looked into the Singaporean system. I've looked at what goes on in the UK. It's detrimental that these types of insights, they go nowhere, because the Muslim community doesn't want to accept the expertise or the know-how of people that are concerned about that. And they rather just deal with the teacher who thinks that he or she knows, or they rather deal with the professional that thinks that they know, but if an imam speaks on these issues, then all of a sudden the imam has to have certain qualifications and so on and so forth. But there's systems that are already out there. There's systems that are already out there and experiences that are already out there that have been well funded, that have been invested in, and we see that it works. And so at the end of the day, that doesn't mean it's going to work for every situation, but there's a lot of reasons why it is that the youth don't attend the masjid. And it could vary from anything to the experience in the masjid to their life goals. It could be that there is issues in the family. It could be that they have issues. It could be that they're distant from the masjid. Come on, people. We have to think outside of the box systematically to really study what the situation is. We're definitely, in most cases, not youth-friendly communities. And I'll end with that, people. Think, reflect, research, discuss as groups, come up with solutions, pilot programs, but don't sit around and think that you know without getting your hands dirty. A degree, a license is not going to be enough to be able to deal with the issue. Concern is not going to be enough without wanting to take action. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.